Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for open and liberal minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, as you know, every single week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Well, this week and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to be joining forces with some of the greatest minds out there to see how us as a community can get ahead and answer some of the pressing concerns that come from our audiences around the world. Well, today we take a virtual trip across the Caribbean where I'm joined by the wonderful Baiju Vasani. Now, you probably know Baiju from his work in arbitration right the way across the globe and his dashing beard that he copied mine from. But he's also going to be the host for this incredible panel where we take on the discussions from the leading centers as well as the tech providers that can help global Indian businesses to more not just in the Caribbean and get access to lines of credit that's available, but also understand how the Caribbean as a destination can keep you on the right side of legalities. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce your new host for this incredible panel, Baiju. Over to you, Baiju. But before then, a quick note from our dear sponsors. If you want to find out more about the Global Indian Series, by the way, well, it couldn't be easier. Simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can listen to this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far.
Hi, this is Dharmesh Shingala, co-founder of Novus. At Novus, we believe technology leads the way for a meaningful change. We are on a mission to change the way corporations, governments, and institutions interact with information. Same as the Global Indian podcast, help people transform for a better future. Find out more on how we are inspiring global change, either at the Global Indian Series website or Novus website to learn more about our innovative software solutions. From our family to yours, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martiniale Resorts and Martiniale Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martiniale, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Thank you, Rajan. I'm honoured to be hosting such a Global India Series special. The only disappointment is that we are not doing this live and in person somewhere in the Caribbean, but rather I'm doing it certainly in a cold and miserable suburb of London. I am surrounded virtually by superstars of the Caribbean dispute resolution market, and I am, for one, extremely interested and excited in what they have to say. What I'm going to do just procedurally is a very quick one-line introduction of our guest panelists. They are, of course, online and on LinkedIn, and I'm sure would love to hear from anyone who would like to get in touch. So in no particular order, Megan Paget-Brown is the CEO and co-founder of the Cayman International Mediation and Arbitration Center, which I think is CMAC, if I'm not mistaken. Now I can see Megan nodding. Shan Greer is the CEO, newly installed, of the BVI International Arbitration Center. Going around, certainly on my screen in an anti-clockwise, is Jiwnani, who is the Director for Europe for Novus, a leading technology company in the area of dispute resolution. And last but certainly not least is Tanya Goddard, who is the Secretary General of the Arbitration and Mediation Court of the Caribbean, the AMCC. So with that introduction, I want to give you guys the floor to what I call the 90-second elevator pitch. It's a lesson that I learned very early in my career, which said that if you can't tell your story or sell your product or give your submission on a case in 90 seconds while you're riding an elevator up in a skyscraper in New York, then you really don't know what you're selling or who you are. So with the pressure on, I'm going to go round in that same order I introduced you. I'll start with you, Megan, and give you 90 seconds to tell us about your institutions that our listeners may not be familiar with.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. Excited to be here and excited to be able to talk about CMAC. We are brand new. I think we are the newest arbitration center, certainly the newest that I know of. We have just opened. Our official launch was January of this year, although we did a little bit of a soft opening at the end of 2022. And our institutional rules will likely come out next week. So really at the very beginning stages. But we decided to enter the market here in Cayman after several years of development to offer sort of a modern technology, full service support in what we think is the ideal setting here in Cayman. We have a joint venture with Arbitration Place to help us with the technology side, which I think we'll touch on a little bit more later on. But we have about 4,300 square feet of hearing facility with 2 large hearing rooms that can be modified for multiple types of disputes or hearing setups. We've got plans to expand a little later this year and double in size. We've got modern national legislation, supportive court system, cutting edge technology, efficient administration, and of course we can offer the flexibility, confidentiality, and high quality arbitrators that you'd expect from any international arbitration region or institution. So we are really trying to enter the market strong and hit the ground running, and hope to offer something unique, but also it's still at the same standard that's expected internationally here in Cayman.
That was less than 90 seconds and incredibly impressive. Can I just ask a question? Because Rajan said this as well. He pronounces it Cayman, and I've always my whole life said Cayman, right? Like it's CAYMN. But you're clearly there, and is the correct way to pronounce it Cayman?
I think we've reached a point where both pronunciations are widely used and accepted, but Cayman is how I grew up pronouncing it here.
How it's correct. Yes. Well, I've been foolish for 48 years. I will correct myself. So thank you for that. Right, Shan, you're in the elevator.
All right. Well, I think BVAC is in the first of international arbitration center in the region. And I think if I were to sell it, it's tempting to go with the traditional beaches, yachting, and a famous drink we call the painkiller. But I think what makes BVI special to us lawyers is the quality of the dispute work which can be found on what is in fact a collection of islands measuring a mere 59 square miles. Now, on a good day, our lawyers, arbitrators, and courts handle claims valuing hundreds of millions of dollars in a multitude of industries and sectors, and you just aren't going to find that quality of work in many other places in the Caribbean region. And because of that experience, our dispute resolution community has mastered the art of getting it done better, faster, cheaper, which of course are always the boxes you want to tick, than anyone anywhere else. That's certainly what I'm going to say. And certainly the Arbitration Center has taken pride in following in that tradition. Our Arbitration Act and rules surpass international best practice with provisions that give parties the flexibility they need to resolve their disputes effectively. And in addition to that, we have a state-of-the-art, full-floor, modern facility with hearing rooms, breakout rooms, translator rooms, but most important, a fantastic lounge that has a beautiful sea view for those in-person breaks during the in-person hearings. And if I may say so myself, and I certainly will, our coffee is not too shabby either. We have coffee machines in every room.
Coffee is always important. Always.
I know. That's why I left it for last. Leave the best for last.
Definitely. As you exit the elevator, you left us with a great thought. Sid, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on today. I'm very excited to learn about the Caribbean and the alternative dispute resolution system there. We've worked in many parts of the world and would really love to work in the Caribbean. I'm Sid. I represent Novus. We're a legal technology provider. We have been in the business for 20 years with extensive experience, mainly helping dispute resolution law firms, but we've also worked with governments, corporates, in-house counsels, and institutions, arbitral institutions, and other alternative dispute resolution institutions in our time. We pioneered a software called Novus Arbitrate, also known as Arbicom, which is there as a full-service portal, exchange, platform, whichever the word you use in your part of the world is, which will enable you to organize and host your arbitrations via the cloud or electronically, and creating a one-stop shop for your clients in terms of the document exchange. Thank you, Baiju.
Great. Thank you, Sid. Tanya, over to you.
Hi, so let me just put on my newscaster voice so that it sounds impressive. Right off our website, I would say that the Arbitration and Mediation Court of the Caribbean, the AMCC, is an international commercial dispute resolution center based in Barbados. We are younger than the BVI, established in 2017, and we offer high quality, efficient, cost-effective arbitration, mediation, and in general, wider ADR services to Caribbean and global clients. The AMCC's panel of experienced and respected arbitrators, mediators, and neutrals in general, practicing from both within the Caribbean, which has a very important cultural context for certain industries, and internationally, offers our clients the widest ranging professional and sector expertise, and added to our full suite of ADR services, underlying quality assurance, through trained professional development as well, which is another aspect of what we do in terms of training and development. So, and of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention the Caribbean Sea. That's my pitch.
Thank you, Tanya. Talking about Caribbean newscasters, of course, anyone who grew up in England in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had Trevor McDonald as one of the voices of my childhood. I always remember how excellent it was, except when India beat West Indies in the 80s in the World Cup. I remember that broadcast, and he was not happy.
Well, we are the home of Sir Garfield Sobers, so we do take those things personally.
They do take it personally.
And you didn't have to grow up in England to know about Trevor McDonald, because he was literally everywhere.
Absolute gem, absolute treasure. Tanya, let me start back with you now, so you don't feel that you're always last. I'm going to give you the first dibs on this. So many of our listeners will have businesses or interest in business around the world and in the region, and will be familiar with litigation and court processes. But all of you are promoting alternative dispute resolution, either in the form of arbitration and all of you, interestingly, have in your name the word mediation, which is non-binding, whereas arbitration is binding. But what advantages do you see for clients who may be listening to use arbitration and then your services as opposed to going to court?
Where do we begin with that one? It's one of those topics that we discuss ad nauseum. To some extent, I'm still very much a practicing attorney at law, in addition to being an arbitrator and part of the court annexed mediation program. So I understand the needs that clients would have in this regard. I can honestly state that the tried and true reasons still stand. It's cost effective, it's confidential. You get to choose, your panel depending on the type of dispute. I think those are the pillars which will always make arbitration successful and a very good option for parties who wish to resolve their disputes as we go across a variety of sectors and industry. So definitely, even though we may want to put a twist on it, the pillars and the foundations of why arbitration is still very much an option is because of those traditional reasons that we have. And I would have to say in the Caribbean, we try to maintain the best practices and best international standards in that regard. So there definitely benefits that, you know, as I was stating, being cost efficient, being confidential, having access to experts who understand the regional context in which we operate, which can often be a challenge. Parties like Shan who understand those nuances. So definitely it is a good option for parties.
Thank you. Sid, do you have anything to add, or is this an area where, because you're and I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background. I think someone is delivering something to the house. But Sid, is this something that you're seeing increasingly? Because I know your company does litigation and arbitration. Is this something you're seeing more of?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing definitely, you know, a massive uptick in this, as you mentioned in your notes as well. This is something that's going on. We're able to monitor trends quite well because, of course, the volume of the projects we get, we can see which direction they're going in, which form of resolution they're using, which institutions they're going with. So we're able to monitor that quite closely. Yeah. So from a distance, we're able to see that sort of trend. Yeah, absolutely.
Shan?
Yes, no, and I think enforceability is certainly one that's important. And I know that Tanya has listed several. I think one that I want to focus on is the risk of reputation. I think if we've all been looking at the news, I think Balenciaga has taught us that you can build a reputation over a lifetime and have it destroyed in 2.2 seconds. And in that respect, I think the confidentiality, which Tanya meant, is really important. If I can give a Caribbean example, I don't know if you've heard of the ICSID dispute, which was filed against the Grenada government by True Blue Development Limited. And this is a case which relates to hotel development under their CIP program 2 years ago. And after feeling disgruntled about how the government had treated it under that program, the directors of True Blue filed an ICSID claim. And then they went on a very public campaign, which Grenada government had to do a lot of damage control. And Grenada is not an exception to this. If you look just recently at the Trinidad case, it was the High Court very recently set aside a $126 million award that was won by a Brazilian contractor. And the judgment itself had a lot of detail about the case, which was widely publicized both locally, regionally, and internationally. I think GAR, as a matter of fact, had
they did
the award very recently. And so confidentially matters. And people automatically assume that, it's arbitration, it's confidential. But in fact, the court proceedings aren't confidential unless your arbitration laws provide for that. And certainly in BVI, our Arbitration Act has confidentiality built into it. And so we can, if these cases were in our region, there would be a better chance to keep these confidential. So I think in terms of confidentiality, both in and outside of the process, arbitration and mediation give you that a more secure process.
Thank you, Shan. Megan, anything to add to what has been said?
I think most of that is all very well covered. Just to pick up another point to emphasize, I think being able to choose your own arbitrators is a huge advantage. And particularly if you're working in a technical field, if you don't have to spend the first day of trial educating the judge on the basics of what your dispute is about or the underlying technology. You know, if you have a crypto dispute, you don't want to have to spend 2 days explaining what blockchain is to your judge. You can have an expert come in and already be at the level you need them to be at to properly and efficiently, which becomes cost effective, to hear that dispute. I think there's also a little bit more of a psychological aspect of it. There have been some interesting studies. I think I saw one out of Thailand related to their arbitration center, their attempt to grow arbitration there, but actually the psychological significance of the control that you can have over the process of arbitration. You know, it emphasizes party autonomy in a way a court doesn't. You know, if you go through regular civil litigation, you're kind of potentially rolling the dice on the judge that you get or the days that you get that judge. And with arbitration or mediation, where you get this, parties get to control that process, the timeline, the knowledge of technical subjects that you need people to have, that can reduce a lot of stress and anxiety, which not only can lead to a more satisfactory outcome, but if you're talking about joint ventures, things like that, it can actually protect business relationships as well if you still have outstanding contracts moving forward. And I think that that is a really important aspect that shouldn't be discounted either when choosing between traditional litigation or some form of arbitration or mediation.
Megan, maybe I can stay with you because you are as you said, the newest center in the region. Now, the region has always been very busy in terms of work, particularly trust work, offshore work. I mean, certainly a lot of work I've done in the asset tracing, fraud, litigation sphere in the English courts and in arbitration in London, whether ICC, FCIArb or otherwise, but English law, often involves companies in the Caribbean region who, are an offshore entity as part of the equation. But what I've seen recently is and you guys epitomize this, which is to move the dispute from London, let's say, which I think would be the loser in the equation as more disputes get resolved in the Caribbean, and moving those questions to the Caribbean region. I also see an interest of the what I would call Indian companies, whether those are companies from India or companies owned by Indian nationals or Indian diaspora, looking at the Caribbean region as one of interest, particularly in the financial realm. To what do you ascribe this interest in the Caribbean recently in terms of dispute resolution? And what benefits do you see potentially for Indian companies looking to do business in the Caribbean region? Like what is it that's now pushing this region to the fore?
I think it's multifactorial. I guess starting with Cayman and our entry into the market, so to speak, our Law Reform Commission in the sort of 2009, 2010 era phase did recognize that an arbitration center would be beneficial to the area. It would reduce the strain on the local court system, as efficient as it is. Just, every year, everything is growing. You're getting more and more cases, and the courts were starting to outgrow their facility. And that was when, in 2012, they modernized the arbitration law, and then it, like everything, just takes time to get going. So I think it's been in the works for probably 10 years in some capacity here. But the drive more recently, I think, is that I've seen with clients and just speaking to other practitioners in general, there's much more openness now across the board to considering different regions, different institutions. There is less of this focus on having to just do things the way we've done things before in the places we always did them before. And so as companies and in-house counsel, and the transaction lawyers that are writing these clauses for arbitration are looking at ways that they can be more efficient or find a better seat for certain types of disputes, or different advantages and disadvantages of different areas. I think that the expertise that does already exist in the Caribbean is starting to be recognized more and more, and those advantages are starting to be recognized more and more. I think in addition to that, if you look at the growth of the Caribbean as a whole, it's been on an excellent trajectory over the last few years. It has a very large, very advanced workforce. I can't remember the statistic, but I think in 2012, it was some very, very high percentage of the Caribbean workforce had advanced education. You have just better and better infrastructure here every year across the Caribbean. You have lots of affluent visitors, both for tourism and business purposes throughout the year. And so I think all of that is just putting the Caribbean more and more on the map for people to consider. And then once they start considering it, they realize all the advantages to doing business here or resolving disputes here. So you've got regional, geographic advantages, time zone advantages, potentially speed advantages. You know, a lot of these big institutions or very established arbitrators, you might have to wait much longer just because they're already booked. And so if you want to do things more efficiently, you might find that the Caribbean is the perfect place to do it. And certainly the setting does not hurt, particularly at this time of year, if you're weighing up where you'd like to be.
Yeah, I have to say one thing that certainly you said that one thing that specifically resonates with me is the amount of talent in arbitration in the Caribbean region that I think is under-recognized. I really do, in terms of a region, and that certainly resonates with me. And I think from an Indian perspective, and I can speak as Indian diaspora, our history with the Caribbean, of course, is very long and very deep. Not all of it is happy, certainly in the hundreds of years ago. But I think recently, certainly, it's been one of incredible strides in terms of like the diaspora in England or the United States. It's one of recognizing the value of where we are and where our ancestors ended up, but also then what is the future. So Shan, what can you add to what Megan said? Because I think she's given an excellent answer, but I can see that there are lots of opportunities, not just now, but also in the future for the Caribbean.
Yeah. No, certainly I don't think this uptick is specific to the Caribbean. We have seen the increase in the use of arbitration in Africa, in Pacific Islands, in India, and in Asia. And I think certainly the tide started to move when Singapore and Hong Kong opened their international arbitration centers. And once they became successful, we thought, well, wait a minute, if these little islands, if these little countries could, we can do it too. And everybody hopped onto the bandwagon. And certainly I was mentioning with Tanya, when we started promoting arbitration in 2011, you know, you were sort of trying to explain the basics, but as people realize, look, there is talent here. We do have a lot of investment, and that's one of the things that we constantly need to dispel. I know I went to an arbitration conference, and a colleague of mine did a presentation on arbitration in the region and in France, and the gentleman says, oh, I didn't realize there was anything to arbitrate about in the Caribbean, because there is this misconception that there aren't sophisticated projects, that there aren't high value stakes. And in fact, between Asia and the Caribbean, there are billions of dollars worth of investment going to and fro. And certainly from an Indian perspective, you're absolutely right, Baiju. We have a long history with the indentured laborers coming over to the Caribbean. And certainly my grandfather out of Trinidad is one of the descendants of the persons who came down. And that means that the Indian culture is literally webbed into ours. And so we have that connection between them and us, as it were. And I think that whereas before there was a movement of people, I think what you're going to be seeing now in terms of relationships between India and Caribbean is the movement of technology. We've already seen that, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. There is a technology company in India who is currently registered in Bahamas. It's a fairly large one. It'll come to me a little later. And also, a lot of Indian companies have set up, these centers, site centers. We also have a lot of Indian training companies that have set up in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, and they even have connections with our local university. So I think what we will find is, GenPact. I knew it would come to me, GenPact. So you have several connections, and I think what we're going to see is a lot of movement in the technology sector, and that's probably where the disputes are going to arise and where we're going to have to pay more attention to deliver services that meet their specific needs.
Sid, I'll come back to you in a moment because I have a sort of twist on the question for you. Tanya, maybe you want to answer this, and then I'll come back to Sid. Tanya, you're
By
on
now
mute.
I should be accustomed. I was speaking to Rajan about this, and it was so eerie how things happened. When we first spoke, I said to him, yes, definitely we've had a long connection. And just before Barbados became independent in 1966, the chair in which our Speaker of the House sits was a gift from the government of India. And it's still there today. So we've had that long relationship. And just to bring everyone up to date, I was just speaking to Raja and I said to him, do you know I was invited on Monday to a workshop? The government of India, in collaboration with the UN Development Fund and the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Ministry of Energy, are having a workshop on energy. That's oil and gas, renewable energy, be it photovoltaic, wind, any type in electric vehicles, where they are looking to develop those industries within the region. So just to show you the types of interest we've had from companies coming in, strangely enough, Barbados has issued 2 offshore oil licenses for BHP, which is now Woodside, looking to have more investors in that realm, and definitely in the renewable energy sector, electric vehicles, solar panels, the whole bit, batteries, what's not, wind turbines. There's development there. So there are definitely opportunities. It is quite possible, because I don't quite have my crystal ball, that disputes therefore are going to emerge in these new sectors, fintech, biotech, definitely life sciences, which are being pushed by governments because they are an option to the more traditional types of investments. So looking forward, it is a possibility that those are areas where we may see disputes.
Yeah, and I think Indian companies and Indian diaspora companies are certainly leading at the forefront of those types of sectors. So I think there's certainly synergies between the two. So let me come to you, Sid, in terms of tech, because you talked about Novos Arbitrate or Arbicom, and certainly what we've seen since COVID is a move to cloud-based platforms, virtual hearings, and technology. Certainly, look, as we all are here today, we're all dispersed all over the world, but able to do this podcast. And certainly what I'm seeing is arbitration institutions trying to differentiate themselves through their use of technology, their platforms. What are you seeing in terms of the movement of tech as a tech company in the dispute resolution space? And what do you see as I guess, the future? Because a lot of people say that AI is going to be the future of dispute resolution. And it's certainly with is it Chat GPT?
It is, yeah.
And all these kind of different functions that we'll soon be seeing arbitration using AI, but certainly technology is the key for the forefront of all of these institutions. And then I'll pass the floor over to our colleagues to talk about their use of technology. Particularly, I think, for arbitration hearings, but maybe even for housing a particular case.
Yeah, it's a great question, Baiju, and it's something that we've been monitoring very closely over these last 5-10 years, even before the pandemic. There was already seemed to be a consensus in the arbitration community, and I give big props to the arbitration community on this, because I think that's where they led slightly from the dispute resolution space. They slightly led in this area. They had more control. The institutions were more flexible than perhaps the court system. And they started asking this question about, are we really going to just continue doing things by email, particularly as the cases get bigger, as the volume of documents gets bigger? You've got those fun scenarios where you need to send all of your documents over to the other side, and then you've got 45 attachments, all of which are bigger than the email limit. Then what you do is you have some poor junior stay up one evening and draft up a beautiful index on email 1, followed by 6 attachment emails, and they send it all off in that moment of glory, only for number 2 to bounce back. So 2's bounced back, right? And now they have to draft up the first index again, splitting 2 into 2A and 2B, right? They then send that through again, and they get those through. But one of the arbitrators wasn't particularly tech savvy and shows up to the first meeting using references from the original index and asking why everyone else is referring to index 2A and 2B, right? So this is what happened, right? Sorry, just giving a little bit of background.
No, I could see everyone.
You're speaking to things that we're laughing because this has happened more times than we can count.
Exactly.
You're speaking to our experience.
It's a laugh of recognition.
Good. So for the listeners as well, like why is this guy giving all this background? Okay, so then we come in, the big firms that we work with on, disclosure exercises and stuff. There's come on, Sid, we can't keep on working like this. You guys need to work with us, and we're of course there for you. It's like, yeah, absolutely. So let's work on a platform together. Let's make a document exchange platform. Let's just start there. Let's just start with a simple document exchange platform. Let's not get anybody thinking that we're trying to get all super ambitious here. And all you do is you put all the documents for the case into the platform using a simple upload link, okay? And then everything's in one place. We have a demarcation for claimant documents. We have a demarcation for respondent documents, and everything's up in the system, okay? The institution can see that the parties have put their documents into the right place. The arbitrators have access to the documents, any documents that need to be exchanged between the parties, everything's in one place. No one can turn around and say they didn't get attachment 2A, okay? So that's how the story began. And then from there, of course, we grew. So we could start adding exhibit managers. We could start adding calendar invitations. We can start adding communication facets. We can start adding a Q&A so that the institutions communicate with the parties in a transparent way so that everybody has visibility of the questions that are being asked to the institutions. We can do that. We can then start putting arbitrator availability into the calendar function. You can see how naturally it grew from a small document exchange platform into something that can really help the institution run the case smoothly. The case managers can ask people where certain documents are. They can give permissions to different people to see different things for a certain amount of time. You can expose one document or one folder to an expert witness without exposing other things, without exposing previous correspondence on the email chain. You can do all of these things in a much more organized way. And that's how really that journey began. That's the first part of your answer. And in terms of the second part regarding the use of AI, absolutely. And that's something that's coming up in the future. And, we recently published an article about how AI is going to be the future in the legal industry generally. And people are already talking about how you can go into GPT and put in a very complicated question, about which protocol you need to use for an arbitration in a particular country with a different governing law and just jurisdiction clause, etc. And ChatGPT will spit out an answer that can be pretty formidable. And that is really, of course, going to only accelerate the facility, because as things go on and we start using technology in the document exchange in dispute resolution, and we use AI more for the getting quick answers, I think there will be a junction where all these things start to come together. Thank you.
Thanks, Sid. Sean, let me come to you because I've always come to you second. So I'm gonna start with you. Tell us about certainly your institution's use of tech and where you see the importance of tech in any institutions that's growing.
I think just to lean on what Sid said, I think there are two reasons why lawyers don't like technology. And the first is that we are very risk adverse. Nobody wants to be the lawyer with their cat on their face saying, I am not a cat. And because we are so emotionally invested in our cases going right, like if anything goes wrong, and the reason why I was laughing when Sid was talking about that is because if you see this index goes, you will see lawyers have nervous breakdowns because a page has 2A when it should have 2, because we're so invested in the perfection of the process and nobody wants to take the risk of trying something new. I don't think I'm being controversial saying that. The second thing is we don't like learning things other than law, because law is what we're good at. That's what we want to do. So anything that requires us to go out and learn something new, we don't like it. As a matter of fact, I remember when I just started practicing, I told my uncle I was doing a computer course, and he said, Sean, law is for lawyers. Leave this computer stuff for the secretaries. Why are you doing this computer thing? That's not the business of law. And thank goodness I didn't take his advice, because right now, computers is the business of everyone. And who would have thought in 20 years that we would be typing our own submissions and pretty much, doing a lot of the work that traditionally before would be done by secretaries. And so what we have to do as centers is make that transition seamless. And one of the good things about the pandemic is that it gave us a chance to try the new technology without the risk, because everybody knew we were trying something new. So if you got it wrong, it wasn't so bad. And people were a little more forgiving. Even the guy with the cat got away with it because, we're all trying really hard in a very, very difficult thing. So there was a level of forgiveness. And now that we understand, I think as centers, what we have to do is make that transition seamless. And certainly what we are doing at our center is, instead of, from a cost perspective, it's not effective for us to provide all of the technology that's out there. But what we do is we enter into strategic relationships with organizations like Novus so that we can provide that effortless service, so that persons don't have to go out there and find which company do I need to do transcription, which company do I need to do my document management, who do I need? And lawyers don't like to ask these questions. They just want it when it's there, and they want it to do what it's supposed to do, and they want it to do it as easy as possible. So we're constantly looking at which companies we can work with, what collaborative agreements we can enter into, both with other institutions and the service providers, to provide that seamless service. And I think in that respect, if these are the sort of collaboration we can have with the various Caribbean institutions within the region.
Thank you, Shan. Tanya, let me come to you. What about tech and your institution?
Definitely tech is at the forefront. When I joined the AMCC, I joined in January 2020. By March, we were in the pandemic. So you could understand that it was pretty much, yeah, excellent timing. What I would say is this: arbitration has in many ways always had a relationship with tech, as we facilitated persons who had to travel internationally. One wanted a suitcase full of binders and folders, and certain aspects of the procedural, matter we dealt with via email or telephone and what's not. So there was sort of that foundation. And then definitely, as Shan said, with the pandemic, it gave us that room to expand and to try different bits of technology. And to some extent, I think parties started to expect it. They started to expect that their institution would have a list of resource persons or organizations that they work with that they can easily refer. And when you do so through an institution, there's a level of trust, because you believe your institution would have vetted that entity that they're referring to, or that organization. And therefore, parties started to say, well, do you work with an organization that does A or B or C or D? So what the pandemic did was definitely speed up a process that was already underway in terms of using technology. And for institutions, you want to be able to provide to your clients. Now, I agree with Shan. For us within the region, we have to look at the cost, and it's not always cost effective to have all these services online, but definitely be that resource that people can go to. And therefore, I'm often asked the question, who do you go to for transcription? It's not an expensive arbitration. It may be a lower value, so we can't hire the big guys, but is there another option? Translation? Those are the kinds of questions we are often asked. And yes, it is necessary for us to have resource parties, and I expect that will be a growing trend as well.
So Megan, as the newest institution, you always have the pressure to be the most tech savvy. So where are you guys on tech?
I think that the pressure to be sort of cutting edge is certainly present, and we were in a little bit of a unique situation in that we weren't up and running through the pandemic, so we didn't have that lead time that some of the other centers had to try out things and get a sense for things. So we realized that to immediately enter the market at the level that we needed to be at for technology, we needed a partnership to do that effectively. So we've actually done a joint venture with Arbitration Place, which is a virtual and in-person, but they're focused on more on the virtual side. At least that's our arrangement, out of Toronto in Canada. They have been a leader in the virtual industry right from the beginning in 2020. I think they've managed something like 70,000 hours of virtual hearings at this point. They average about 12 virtual matters a day. And so through CMAC, anyone who comes in and wants to have a virtual or hybrid dispute can access their platform through us. They have virtual case managers who are fantastic. They could walk absolutely anyone through the process of a virtual hearing and make it seem intuitive and simple. They provide virtual court reporting, virtual transcription, interpretation, translation, any of those services that you need. We can provide those in person as well for those that aren't comfortable with the virtual aspect for that. But on the technology side, they really have a setup that runs very, very seamlessly. It's a great platform. What I think they do very well is specifically on the case manager side and the prep for the virtual hearing is making sure everyone understands in advance and gets whatever coaching they do or don't want in advance so it can move smoothly and you're not starting out trying to figure it out. You're already comfortable coming in. And I think that is very significant. If you have maybe a witness appearing from another location and they don't have the right, you don't need anything terribly special, but they need microphone or they need headphones, they can actually send a tech package. We can arrange that, have that sent to their location so they can be up and running, at the same level, same speed as the rest of or the other parties involved. And so I think that's given us sort of the edge we need, the platform we need, where we recognize that we specifically didn't have that expertise, but we were able to bring that in from someone else. For our physical space, just so we could integrate everything well, we did consult with the Center for Legal and Courtroom Technology out of the United States. I know at least at one point they boasted the most technologically advanced courtroom in the world. I know that there are a lot of courtrooms in the running for that now, so I can't speak to this specific moment, but they've really been at the cutting edge of courtroom technology and design and possibility, and they were fantastic in helping us sort of get an idea of what we would like to have as a setup. And also, I think particularly with technology, because it changes so quickly and there's so much change, looking ahead to what the possibilities will be in 6 months and a year and 6 years is important as well, and making sure that we are set up in a way that we can adapt to that and we can make those changes, and that we have the ability to keep making changes and stay on the cutting edge.
Future-proof yourselves. Let me ask my final question before then. I've got a sort of a short, let's say, surprise topic to leave everyone with. But my last question is on diversity. So it won't be remiss on our viewers and listeners that we have 3 women leaders. And something that's always impressed me of the Caribbean is the number of women who are in positions of authority and power, whether it's ambassadors, head of state, ministers, leaders of institutions, lead lawyers. And I think that's something that's incredibly impressive about the region. It is also, of course, an incredible melting pot in terms of black, white, brown, so and everyone sort of comes from a diaspora that is incredibly mixed over the last 200-300 years, which makes it in some sense an example of diversity, right, in a lot of ways. And one thing that the international arbitration system has been criticized for is the people who are sitting as arbitrator tend to be older Caucasian men from North America or Western Europe or Australasia. What steps, so we, and I know you guys sit as arbitrator, But in your institutions, what steps are you taking or do you intend to take in terms of making sure that the arbitrators sitting on cases are reflective of the parties that are before you? And Tanya, maybe I'll start with you, then I'll go to Megan, and I'll end with Shan.
Yes, thanks, Baiju. What I would say is, when I thought about that question, I said to myself, in many ways, we don't always consider diversity, because in the Caribbean, you go to school, you go to university, you look around your classroom, inherently, it is diverse. When we do training and capacity building, and Shan could attest to that, the groups are diverse intrinsically, but I would agree that there seems to be a bit of a gap between the training and capacity building and actually getting the opportunity to engage in arbitration. What I would say is, what I did when I first came on board was, I wanted to give Caribbean ADR practitioners the opportunity to be on a part of an institution such as ours, and we opened up that persons who are qualified. Now, I don't want to say that we open it for diversity for the sake of diversity, because we still have an issue of quality control and integrity and so forth. But we let it be known to parties that if you're properly qualified and you have a level of experience that we may not know about, and you're from within the region, we would like to know, and have our directors review your qualifications and see if you can be part of our panels. And part of that process, we were then able to include parties who necessarily would not have been engaged in arbitration at that level. It happened to also work in terms of diversity, because there are more women for whatever reason. There are different ethnicities, there are different backgrounds. So part and parcel of that came out diversity. To say that we have an actual diversity policy, no, that wouldn't be right, because you still have to balance the issue of integrity and qualifications and having international best practice. But we like to think that once there's an opportunity, and I've seen it, where our fellow Caribbean arbitrators will have a matter and they will recommend their colleagues as well, to help them gain that experience or to help them have that opportunity. And inherent in that system has also expanded diversity within the region. So it's a different way of doing it. It's not like an affirmative action position per se. What it is, it's a more subtle, more seamless transition, which helps the parties.
Yeah, it's a consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Megan.
As a very new institution, we haven't really been in the position of making many appointments or anything yet, but I think in building our roster, it's something we've been cognizant of or tried to keep at the forefront. And also, I noticed when I first started getting inquiries about our roster and applications to be on the roster, it certainly came from very specific geographic areas, very homogenous type backgrounds. And I tried to make a very conscious effort to go out and start finding, for every one of those applications that came in, I did try and go out and find some people that fit a different profile, but also had experience, and tried to see if they had interest in coming in. And I think that our roster is coming together in a way that I'm happy to see. I think going forward, the appointments will be important, and being willing to appoint. I think that one of the challenges as an appointing authority is you want to make sure the parties are happy. And so there's an expectation of a particular profile of arbitrator. And so being able to make a different choice can be difficult. I think we're quite small, and for us, that's an advantage. People can come to us recognizing that we are going to try and make those choices. And I think that will suit some people well, and hopefully that will help. From an education standpoint, I think we have a lot of interesting training opportunities coming up for local practitioners who are interested in getting more into arbitration and mediation, so we can build up the pipeline, hopefully, at least here in Cayman, which does add diversity. I think that there's a lot of value in just making sure, even if you have a conference, making sure that you have a very diverse panel, because that does raise the profile of practitioners who wouldn't necessarily get the same recognition otherwise. Yeah, I've been surprised, honestly, even just being involved in this project, as we were saying earlier, how many people here in Cayman actually have masses of arbitration experience from even before they came to Cayman. And if there's no platform for anyone to know about that, if they don't have the exact same certification that everyone from England has, you lose out on all of those people. So trying to make it a very educational process across the board, whether it's building up the pipeline, but also on the transactional lawyer side, the client side, the party side, and making sure that everyone realizes that vast array of expertise that comes from so many areas. And then I think naturally a lot more people get a lot more opportunities, because they start getting more visibility and people start finding themselves more open to looking in different places for the opportunities.
Shan, I know this is something close to your heart.
Yeah, and you know, my opinion, this is going to be controversial, so I'm giving you advance notice. But there are lots of initiatives, and anytime an initiative starts with, let's open the doors and let everyone come in, I don't like these sorts of initiatives, because as a person of color, and I think we're all here, I don't know very many good persons of color who want to be appointed because of their color or because they're a woman. Nobody wants that. And so the initiatives I like to support are the ones that say, let's take the barriers down so everyone can walk in, so that you can be chosen for your abilities, and that the barriers that were there because of the historical realities can be taken down to give you a fair shot. And, you know, you made a very good point, Baiju, about, you know, what the Caribbean is like. And in fact, for the ordinary person, when they think Caribbean person, they think of an English-speaking person of African descent. And in fact, we have Caribbean people of Chinese descent, Indian descent, Syrian descent. There's the First Nations people who you'll find in Dominica and in Belize. We have Caribbean people who speak Dutch, Spanish, French, you name it, it is probably in there. And like Tanya said, because I come from a very multicultural family, I generally don't think about it, you know, but the truth is my brother is Muslim. I have a Hare Krishna uncle. I have, you know, what my father was saying, uncle that looking as Chinese can be. But he speaks Caribbean. And I will even go so far, I know this is the controversial one. There are people who are as white can be because of their European lineage spanning hundreds of years. But to the core, they are just as Caribbean as any brown person. And I would not deny them that Caribbeanness any more than I would any other person. So to me, when we talk about diversity, what I would like to see, and certainly what we're going to focus on, is dispelling some of the stereotypes that cause us to exclude people. So by way of example, yes, an arbitrator can be old, white, and a man, but she can also be a Caribbean woman with dimples like me. They could be, you know, the African person living in France, a Chinese woman living in Zimbabwe. Globalization is such that you can't allow stereotypes to color what it is that that arbitrator should look like. And I think to break that mold, we have to do more to profile persons who don't necessarily fit that mold. And I know Arbitral Women and Real, they have done an excellent job of profiling people who don't necessarily fall into the traditional group. And certainly as a Black Caribbean woman from St. Lucia, which is a little island, I work on cases all around the world. That would not be possible if it weren't for some of these initiatives that didn't say, hey, let's give Shan an arbitration because she's brown and a woman, but simply said, here's a possible arbitrator. These are her skill sets. We've given her an opportunity to speak, and people hear me speak and say, hey, she sounds like she could probably divide 2 by 2. Let's try and, you know, pick her for an arbitration. Oh, look at her skill sets. Look at what she can do. And so we are working with these organizations and also ensuring that our panels include people from a wide spectrum of backgrounds, And this is not just about like race, for example, we need arbitrators who aren't lawyers. That's another diversity that we don't necessarily talk about, that we lawyers like to hog the limelight. So we're looking at trying to expand the pool of arbitrators so that one day when you're chosen because you're good at what you do, as opposed to we need to tick a box, because the box ticking does no one any favors, including people of color.
And I think you've all spoken extremely eloquently on the question, but it really is a question of opportunity in terms of chicken and egg, because how do you get to Shan's point where they listen to you and they think you have the experience and the credentials? You only get to that point if you have the opportunities to do so. And I think ultimately that's really the question. And then the second question I think that both Megan and Tanya touched on is recognition of what you do. So there are a lot of people who have good experience who are actually, though, under the parapet for whatever reason, who need to be encouraged to put their head above the parapet and say, here I am, and here is what I can do, and be encouraged to do more. And I think I'm
sorry to have on, but there is a cultural reason why that is as well, because a lot of Caribbean people are trained in the British tradition, which is you don't talk. I'm a British barrister. People come to me. I don't advertise. People will just see my work, and then, they will do. And people say, oh, Shan, you're out there a lot. And I said, well, you have to be out there. Nobody's going to pick you if they don't. Oh, but I do good work. People don't know it. It doesn't matter.
I spend too much time in America, and I'm married to an American. So I get myself out there. Right, I'm going to end, because I know I have to pass the floor back to Rajan, who's itching to get the microphone back. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to squeeze our 90 seconds into, let's say, 10 seconds or 15 seconds each, and we'll end on maybe a motto or a motivational quote that sings to you, and why. So maybe we'll go in order. Let's see, what order shall I'll start with you, Sid, because you've been a little bit quiet. Then I'll go with Tanya, I'll go with Shan, and then I'll end with Megan.
So my favorite one, which has always been my favorite one, was a quote which has been by William Blake, which I've always loved, and it says, "He who does," and I've tried my best to use this in my life as well, but he who does good must do it in minute particulars, because progress can only be achieved in arts and sciences or the law or technology only in small, organized particulars, not in general good.
Excellent. Very good example for everything we do. Right, Tanya.
This was a tough one, because I actually have a little side hobby collecting these types of quotes. And if you look at my WhatsApp, I have a quote from Zora Neale Hurston. So it was quite the challenge, but very simple. If you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answer.
I like that.
And it goes across the board for all types of events and activities in your life, be it in, self-introspection, awareness, not understanding things. Ask the right question, and you can get the right answer.
Excellent. Shan.
Yeah, so my dad was one of my earliest and most impressionable teachers. And anytime we would go out, especially at night, he would say, remember, go poor luck is not see poor luck. Drunk or sober, mind your business. And that's a very Caribbean thing. And it's actually
I have to translate a little bit. But...
yeah, so it's actually two pros. So the first one is go poor luck is not see poor luck. And what that means is what other people may get, you may not get. Yeah. So don't compare yourself to other people, and don't feel that because someone else got something, you will automatically get it or you will be entitled to it. And the second is, no matter what state of mind you are in, make sure you're minding your business. Because when we went out at night, he said, look, whether you're drunk or you're sober, you make sure that you mind your business. And that's important, especially I find in this new era of fast pace, always in your face, I'm the fastest, I'm the best. I have found that a lot of his problems, and the Caribbean has lots of these, monkey know which tree to climb. That was one of his, but that's not relevant to arbitration. And I find it just sort of tells me what important really is your own journey. And each of our journeys, especially in arbitration, is going to be different, and not to compare yourself. And of course, make sure that at least you're mostly sober so you can go and mind in your business.
It's the only way you can mind your business.
The only way you can mind your business.
Yeah. Megan, you get the final word.
It's hard to top that for sure. I actually happened to be reading something yesterday, and there was a quote in it which unfortunately wasn't attributed, so hopefully someone can fact check me later. But the quote was just, old ways don't open new doors, and I think that is actually quite a good one. And I think that one of the worst reasons why you do something is because that's the way it's always been done. And I think with arbitration in particular, that's something that's been changing. I think with the virtual coming in and the rise of these new institutions and new opportunities, new industries, technology, all of these things, I think that that's one that certainly I'll keep in mind going forward, and something that I've tried to keep in mind, although in a less profoundly stated way up to this point, that it is a changing industry, and we want it to change. So we have to keep looking for ways to make that change moving forward.
Well, with that, I just want to say this was an absolute privilege. And I'm sure everyone listening and watching will have learned an immense amount, and will be getting their draft contracts out and adding arbitration clause provisions in each of your institutions. But certainly if they don't have one now, they'll be thinking about this in the future. So thank you all so much. And with that, Rajan, I'm going to pass it on to you to do your conclusion.
Thank you very much, Baiju. He is the brown Barry White after all. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. I think on behalf of the global Indian community, understanding more about the markets such as the Caribbean, where we have a sense of familiarity, but that familiarity is also backed by finance. Least we forget, over 80 billion in lines of credit have now been provided from India to the Caribbean. We now know the legal structures. We now know the arbitration centers. We just need to build up on those familiarities. So this is the first of many more discussions looking at brown business around the world, especially with Baiju Vasani. So on behalf of the Global Indian Series, all our ambassadors around the globe and our audiences spanning 48 countries, it's been a privilege having you here, and I look forward for you traveling with us next week as we continue these stories of journeys. Thanks for now.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.